Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight. The investigation into Sunday's Michigan church shooting continues. Officials are working to establish the motive of the attack, which left 4 people dead. Arlene Richards brings us the latest. President Trump announcing a bold new peace plan for Gaza and a tariff that could shake up Hollywood. Mari Otsu at the White House. The president also meeting with the top 4 congressional leaders today. Democrats maintaining they'll force a government shutdown if their demands are not met. Luis Eduardo Martinez on Capitol Hill. New York City Mayor Eric Adams dropped his bid for re-election. How candidates Andrew Cuomo and Zohran Mamdani are reacting.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Paul Graney, in for Tiffany Meyer. The FBI's Detroit field office is continuing to investigate Sunday's Michigan church shooting. The head of the office say they're determined to establish the killer's motive. NTD's Arlene Richards has more.
Several investigators on Monday said they are focused on finding out what motivated a former Marine to allegedly ram a pickup truck into a church and open fire. Authorities say the suspect, identified as Thomas Jacob Sanford, age 40, plowed through the front door and began shooting with a semi-automatic rifle. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Michigan was in the middle of a crowded service at the time of the shooting. According to an official from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, the attacker apparently used gasoline to start a fire, setting the church ablaze. 4 people were killed and 8 were injured, 2 of whom are still in critical condition. At a news conference Monday, the acting head of the FBI Detroit field office said they were working together with all levels of government, local, state, and federal.
The FBI is investigating this as an act of targeted violence, and we are continuing to work to determine a motive. In the past 24 hours, our investigative squads and specialty teams have been out all night, exhausting leads, some of which have been coming in from the public via tips.
He said his office is getting assistance from other field offices across the country. According to the local police chief, they are still clearing out the church, but everyone is now accounted for. Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer also attended the press conference.
As I said, I'm here as the governor, but I'm also here as a fellow Michigander whose heart is breaking by another mass shooting in a place that is supposed to be defined by togetherness.
Whitmer said this is one of the many shootings that have occurred in recent years, including at schools, stores, parades, festivals, and houses of worship. She said she had spoken with President Trump, who offered his condolences. The attack is the second on an American church in little over a month. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
And President Trump, alongside Prime Minister Netanyahu at the White House, unveiling his 20-point plan to end the Gaza war. Joining us now live is NTD's Washington correspondent Mari Otsu. Good evening, Mari. What is the latest from the president's meeting with the Prime Minister?
Paul, good evening. Yes, today, just a little while ago here at the White House, President Trump, joined by Prime Minister Netanyahu, announced their 20-step plan to end the conflict in Gaza. And if both sides agree to the president's plan, there will be an immediate ceasefire. President Trump says that if and when Hamas accepts the deal, all hostages, both alive and dead, will be released within 72 hours. Israeli forces will then withdraw to the yellow line that you can see here to prepare for that hostage release. Gaza will then have a temporary transitional government overseen and supervised by a so-called Board of Peace, which will be headed by President Trump himself. Here's the president expressing his hope for Palestine after the war comes to an end. Watch.
And I challenge the Palestinians to take responsibility for their destiny, because that's what we're giving them. We're giving them responsibility for their destiny, fully condemn and prohibit terrorism and earn their way to a brighter future. They don't want the life that they've had. They've had a rough life with Hamas. If the Palestinian Authority does not complete the reforms that I laid out in my vision for peace in 2020, they'll have only themselves to blame. We're giving them an amazing footprint, and they have amazing support from the leaders of the Arab world and the Muslim world, the great leaders. These are great leaders.
The plan also states that once all of the hostages are released, Israel will then release 250 life sentence prisoners and 1,700 Gazans who were detained after the October 7 attacks. Hamas members who commit to a peaceful coexistence and who commit to putting down their arms will also be granted amnesty under this plan. President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu, who says he accepts the deal, are calling on Hamas to accept it. Meanwhile, this is coming just after President Trump today hosted a trilateral phone call with Prime Minister Netanyahu and the Qatari Prime Minister Al Thani, a key intermediary with Hamas. Take a look.
We had a historic phone call in the Oval Office with Prime Minister Thani. We agreed to launch a formal trilateral mechanism between Israel, Qatar, and the United States to begin a dialogue to enhance mutual security, correct misperceptions, and avoid future misgivings.
In this call, Prime Minister Netanyahu apologized for unintentionally killing a Qatari serviceman during Israel's missile attack on Doha earlier this month. He also apologized for violating Qatari sovereignty and declared that Israel will not attack again in the future. Paul?
Now, Mari, while the president was focused on peace in the Middle East, as you just described, he also had his sights on Hollywood. What can you tell us about his latest move on tariffs?
Sure, Paul, he did. President Trump is now pledging this morning to impose a 100% tariff on any films produced or edited outside of the U.S. This tariff he first announced back in May. He's also adding that California market has been hit the hardest. Many Hollywood movies are at least partially shot or edited abroad. Countries like Canada and the UK offer incentives like tax breaks to bring American film production overseas. President Trump called attention to this phenomenon back in May, calling it a national security threat. And in July, California Governor Gavin Newsom doubled funding for California's film and TV tax credit program in an effort to keep more production in Hollywood. It remains unclear when or how this film tariff will be enacted and if it will affect distributors, producers, or both. Paul, back to you.
Mari, thank you. Good evening. And families of hostages rallied in Israel on the same day Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met with President Trump. Meanwhile, Israeli troops are keeping the pressure on Hamas terrorists in the Gaza Strip. NTD's Jason Perry has the update.
On Monday, people protested in Israel while Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was meeting with President Trump at the White House. The mother of a hostage who has been held captive in the Gaza Strip for almost 2 years now gave a message to Trump.
We hope that you will end the war and bring back home all of our hostages and soldiers. Mr. President Trump, the whole Middle East is looking up to you. 48 hostages are waiting for your word. Fight for us, President Trump.
And later on, after Trump announced the plan to end the war in the Gaza Strip, some residents in Israel shared their thoughts.
I'm really scared. We have learned from suffering and had very bad experiences with deals that were made and then blew up in our faces. But I want to stay optimistic that maybe finally our nightmare will end.
President Trump, like he said, is totally committed to bringing peace and prosperity to this region. This is very, very, very good and happy news, the news that we've all been waiting for here in Israel.
Some residents in the Gaza Strip also shared their thoughts on the same day of the meeting between Trump and Netanyahu.
For 2 years, we've been hearing that tomorrow or the day after, there will be good news or something. We no longer believe anyone.
We are drowning and grasping at straws, clutching to a dream that there will be a permanent ceasefire or a ceasefire and 60-day truce. We are exhausted. I swear we are exhausted.
But until the plan to end the war is agreed to by Hamas, Israeli forces are continuing to operate in one of the terrorist group's final strongholds. On Monday, Israel again dropped leaflets in Gaza City warning residents to evacuate immediately for safety reasons. However, some residents still refuse to leave. At the same time, the main hospital in Gaza City continues to operate. The head of the emergency department explained.
We are providing the minimum service so that we do not lose the patients admitted to the hospital, but we demand that the hospitals be kept away from Israeli attacks and that they operate normally.
Israel has accused Hamas terrorists of operating in hospitals, and last week, Israel released footage of what they said were terrorists firing weapons from inside that hospital in Gaza City. Jason Perry, NTD News.
Jason Perry, thank you. And Russia is responding to the possibility that the U.S. could supply Ukraine with Tomahawk missiles. The missiles could strike deep inside Russia and easily reach Moscow. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pazdar has more.
2, 1, launch.
The United States is considering sending Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine. Vice President J.D. Vance told Fox News on Sunday, "We're certainly looking at a number of requests from the Europeans. The Tomahawk missiles have a reach of over 1,500 miles, easily far enough to hit Moscow if fired from Ukraine." Special Envoy Keith Kellogg commented on the issue while speaking with Fox.
Use the ability to hit deep. There are no such things as sanctuaries. President Zelensky asked President Trump to get Tomahawk missiles, which give you a depth. They're really good systems. America makes the best systems in the world.
Russia responded on Monday, saying the Kremlin is monitoring and assessing the situation.
The question is, who can launch these missiles? Even if they are located on the territory controlled by the Kiev regime, can they be launched solely by Ukrainians, or must they be operated by American military personnel?
The spokesman added that it's also important to know who will set and choose the targets for the missiles, if it will be Ukrainian or American soldiers. Russian President Vladimir Putin previously said that Western countries will make themselves direct parties to the conflict if they supply targeting and intelligence to fire deep inside Russia. And in other Russia-related news, NATO and the EU continue working to fortify borders after reported airspace violations by Moscow. NATO members Poland, Romania and Estonia have all reported recent airspace penetrations by Russia. NATO now plans to build concrete bunkers and anti-drone nets at key energy facilities.
This is a part of our large program to defend our critical infrastructure.
The EU and NATO have also been talking about building a so-called drone wall, which would detect and destroy incoming Russian drones. And on Monday, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky proposed building a joint aerial defense shield together with European nations.
Russia is testing how far it can go. Ukraine proposes to Poland and all our partners to build a joint, truly reliable shield against Russian aerial threats.
The EU's defense commissioner agreed on Monday, saying there is a need to protect nations that are close to Russia.
Defense of this region is a very clear priority. This region is facing, really big threats.
Reuters reports that the EU now plans to propose a defense readiness roadmap ahead of the European Council in October. Arian Pazdar, NTD News.
Arian, thank you. And with less than 48 hours until a potential government shutdown, the four top congressional leaders, 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats, met with President Trump at the White House today. Our Washington correspondent Luis Eduardo Martinez has the latest on the story.
They want to talk about how to fix American health care policy. Let's do it. The Speaker would love to do it. The Senate Majority Leader would love to do it. Let's work on it together. But let's do it in the context of an open government that's providing essential services to the American people.
President Trump and Republican congressional leaders met with Democratic congressional leaders at the White House to try and avert a government shutdown. The House has already passed a continuing resolution to extend current levels of government funding while bipartisan negotiations continue.
If the Democrats make the decision to shut the government down, the consequences are on them, and I think it's absolutely tragic. We've never said that was a good idea. We never believed it is. And I want you to remember, when we voted in the House, we passed it out of the House. The House has done its job. We did that almost 2 weeks ago. Every Democrat in the House except one voted to shut the government down.
Democrats who are in the minority both in the House and the Senate have demanded the extension of COVID-era healthcare tax credits. This is despite the fact that it was Democrats who set the expiration dates for these healthcare tax credits, and despite the fact that Democrats have already voted for current levels of government funding at least 13 times.
Democrats
are fighting to protect the health care of the American people. And we are not going to support a partisan Republican spending bill that continues to gut the health care of everyday Americans.
Senate Republicans are ready to take a second vote on the House-passed continuing resolution before the September 30th deadline.
This is purely and simply hostage-taking on behalf of the Democrats. The Republicans are united. House Republicans, Senate Republicans, President Trump. The House has passed a clean funding resolution to fund the government till November the 21st. It's clean. It is bipartisan.
It's important to note that Republicans, both in the House and the Senate, have historically opposed continuing resolutions, but have agreed to support this one to avert a painful government shutdown. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
So will Wednesday bring us a government shutdown? How would Republicans feel about the White House using a shutdown to further reduce the federal workforce? Hear from Representative Randy Fine tonight on Capitol Report at 7 p.m. Eastern. And big news in New York City. Mayor Eric Adams has dropped his bid for re-election. Now Andrew Cuomo and Zohran Mamdani are reacting. Here's Cuomo.
I applaud his selflessness. You know, we often wonder, is it about us or is it about a greater calling? And I think what Mayor Adams said today speaks volumes. He said, I'm going to put my personal ambition aside for the good of the city, because he's afraid of the result if Mr. Mamdani were to win the election. And we should all be afraid of the result.
Well, I think the race continues to be the same as it was, where it's a race between us and the failed politics that we've seen, whether it's Andrew Cuomo or Eric Adams. It's a politics where Donald Trump and billionaire donors are determining the actions of failed executives. We're going to show that they can't dictate the outcome of this race.
Adams spoke proudly of his tenure as mayor, but he said his now dismissed federal corruption case left voters wary. He also said constant media speculation about his future made it impossible to raise enough money to run a serious campaign. Adams did not endorse any of the remaining candidates, but warned of, quote, insidious forces using local government to advance what he called divisive agendas. Adams' exit could potentially boost Cuomo's campaign. Cuomo casts himself as the one candidate who can beat Democratic Socialist Zohran Mamdani. And still to come this evening, ensuring children are guided in school with morals based in tradition. That's the focus of a hearing today by the Justice Department's Religious Liberty Commission. Jack Bradley brings us the details. And lawmakers are in North Carolina to tackle violent crime and repeat offenders. Victims' families are sharing their experiences and demanding accountability. Christina Corona has more on that when we return. Welcome back. I'm Paul Graney. One of the last tech giants involved in a lawsuit with President Trump has agreed to settle for $24.5 million. The settlement ends a 2021 lawsuit brought against YouTube and its chief executive over its suspension of Trump's account after the U.S. Capitol breach. YouTube, which is owned by Alphabet's Google, is the final big tech company to settle 3 lawsuits brought by Trump after he left the White House. Meta Platforms earlier this year agreed to pay $25 million, and X agreed to pay $10 million. The most recent settlement is expected to go toward the construction of a Mar-a-Lago-style ballroom Trump is building at the White House. And the Justice Department's Religious Liberty Commission, looking into whether religion is being undermined in American K-12 classrooms, and NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has details on today's hearing.
What's the role of religion in education, and how's it being silenced in the classroom? These were topics examined at a Monday hearing by the Justice Department's Religious Liberty Commission. Several panelists speaking on the assassination of Charlie Kirk, saying he devoted his life to educating the youth with values based in religion.
He's the only person I know who didn't get a formal education in a college. Today, most colleges are not a very good place to get such an education. He's the only person I know who put together the most beautiful argument that's ever been put together.
One of the panelists, a football coach, was fired by his school for praying at the games.
I was being prosecuted and persecuted for a 15-second prayer on the 50-yard line after a football game.
Now, he eventually sued and won, but even so, he still says other coaches contact him from throughout the country, receiving the same kind of pushback. A teacher in Loudoun County, Virginia, says she faced pushback for not complying with her school's gender-affirming policies, which disagree with her religion, as the policies claim that there are more genders than just male and female.
I could not stand in front of my Father in heaven one day and say, my pension plan was more important than your truth. But if I say that I love my students, the only right choice would be to stand in love and truth for them.
Other panelists spoke about the importance of reviving religious values in the classroom, giving children more of a direction in life.
Because, as we heard Charlie Kirk say earlier, there is no such thing as a values-neutral classroom. Schools inevitably transmit values through both the explicit curriculum and the hidden curriculum, the unspoken lessons embedded in classroom routines, institutional norms, which topics are or not discussed.
There's been a 70% increase in suicide with older teens and a 151% increase in suicide among preteens. Why? Because they have an existential crisis. They have not found their way to God.
The commission will hold more hearings later this year, and they'll provide President Trump with a report in spring about the recommendations for executive orders that could strengthen religious liberty in America. Reporting by Jack Bradley, NTD News.
Jack Bradley, thank you. And 3 defense attorneys appointed by a Utah judge on behalf of Tyler Robinson, the man accused of killing Charlie Kirk, appeared in their first court hearing today. Utah defense attorney Catherine Nestor has been appointed as Robinson's lead attorney. Nestor has been lead or co-counsel on 9 aggravated murder cases across the country. She was joined today by 2 other public defenders who will assist with Robinson's defense. Nestor asked for a 30-day delay of a preliminary hearing in which the judge would determine if there is enough evidence to move forward with charges. She says she was not waiving her client's right to have the hearing, but she needed time to review the evidence gathered in the case so far. The judge scheduled the next hearing for October 30th. And in Charlotte, North Carolina today, congressional lawmakers held a hearing on violent crime and pre-trial release policies. Victims' families shared their stories, highlighting failures in the justice system. NTD's Christina Corona tells us more, and a warning: this report includes some content some viewers may find disturbing.
Washington, D.C. lawmakers were in Charlotte, North Carolina on Monday for a victims of violent crime hearing, tackling solutions to rising violence. The session follows the deadly stabbing of Ukrainian refugee Irina Zarutska on the city's light rail in August. Congressman Jeff Vandrew said a magistrate judge let Irina's killer walk free even after his own mother called him dangerous.
The magistrate judge said, well, this is the 14th time he committed a crime. But, I think it'll be his last because he signed a handwritten note that he's going to be good. And now a young woman, and there's other stories, it's not the only story, but this young, beautiful woman with her entire future in front of her, working 3 jobs, living the American dream, believing in America, she's gone.
Family members of crime victims testified, including Mia Alderman, the grandmother of Mary Collins, who was murdered in 2020 when she was only 20 years old.
She was stabbed over 130 times. Mary was then wrapped in plastic and hidden inside a mattress.
She says Mary's case has still not gone to trial. She said the pain is made worse by the way the justice system has dealt with the suspects in Mary's murder.
2 of them were released on bond, as if their crimes were minor, as if they stole a candy bar or maybe broke in a car or something.
Steve Federico, father of 22-year-old Logan Federico, also testified. His daughter was fatally shot during a home burglary in May by a repeat offender.
She was 5'3". She weighed 115 pounds. Bang! dead, gone. Why? Because Alexander Devontae Dickey, who was arrested 39 times, 25 felonies, was on the street. He should have been in jail for over 140 years for all the crimes he committed.
Charlotte-Mecklenburg police officer Justin Campbell, who was injured while saving fellow officers during a 2024 ambush that killed 4 officers and left him with a leg that had to be amputated, also testified.
Why is it that we take people who commit these heinous crimes and we do not hold them accountable for their actions? We sit there and we try to give it a reason as a mental health issue or some other type of issues that realistically doesn't take blame.
Congressman Vandrew says safety and American values must come first, and that serious, violent, repeat crimes demand strict action. Christina Corona, NTD News.
Incredible. Still to come this evening, the Pentagon deploying 200 National Guard troops to Portland. That's in response to escalating clashes outside federal immigration facilities. The move comes after President Trump's memorandum to counter domestic terrorism and organized political violence targeting groups like Antifa. Mike Howell, president of the Oversight Project, joins us to discuss. And the Trump administration plans to upgrade coal plants and keep them open. Officials say this investment will secure reliable energy for the U.S. David Lamb has more on that when we return. Welcome back. I'm Paul Graney. National Guard troops are being activated in Oregon, according to a memo received by state leaders. This is 2 days after President Trump announced that he's authorizing the Pentagon to make the move. NTD correspondent Jason Blair has more.
In a memo sent to state leaders, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth has ordered National Guard troops to be deployed in Oregon. This comes after President Donald Trump announced that he's authorizing Hegseth to do so, citing, quote, war-ravaged Portland and to protect, quote, any of our ICE facilities under siege from attack by Antifa. The memo says 200 members of the Oregon National Guard will be called into federal service effective immediately for a period of 60 days. The order says that it's in line with a memorandum using National Guard troops to protect ICE, other federal agents, as well as federal facilities. The memo has not been officially confirmed yet by the Department of War. NTD has reached out to the Pentagon for confirmation. And in Chicago, federal agents were spotted patrolling downtown on Sunday. They were seen armed and wearing tactical gear. Reportedly, some locals were welcoming them while some protested their presence. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker responds.
This is not about fighting crime or about public safety. This is about sowing fear and intimidation and division among Americans.
The Department of Homeland Security announced that 11 arrests were made outside of the ICE detention facility in Chicago. The department posted photos of 2 guns retrieved and, quote, what appears to be some sort of explosive device. Protests have been ongoing the past couple of days outside of an ICE facility near Chicago and Broadview. Over the weekend, Attorney General Pam Bondi says she's deploying federal agents to ICE facilities around the country.
Witnessing a new era of political violence. And now more than 200 violent rioters were at a Chicago ICE facility chanting, arrest ICE, shoot ICE. At least one had a gun. These are not peaceful protests. These are coordinated attacks by radical extremists, and they end now.
More federal agents were seen outside of the ICE facility after reports of increased violence among protesters. The agents were seen dispersing crowds as well as confiscating shields. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.
The deploying of troops to Portland follows President Trump's federal actions aimed at countering domestic terrorism and organized political violence. Back in July, Homeland Secretary Kristi Noem said that assaults against ICE officers had increased exponentially, and she linked the surge to doxing campaigns by anarchist and Antifa-affiliated groups in Portland. Now, joining us to discuss is Mike Howell, attorney and president of the Oversight Project. Mike, great to see you. Good evening. The state of Oregon says the president overstepped his authority by sending troops there. Is that the case?
No, but of course they're going to try that argument, and you got perilous legal territory out there in Oregon, and so they might get at least a district court judge to pause it. I think they actually already did issue a stay on this, and the judge will issue a decision soon. So it's going to run its course, but the president's well within his authority. I mean, we have a massive domestic terrorism problem in this country, and Oregon's a hotbed for it. And, it's federally justified. We can't be having, one state that has radical politicians and these radical elements basically sourcing all this violence. And it's a terrible thing, and I'm glad the president has acted.
Why do you say he is legally within his bounds to do this?
Because it's a federal issue, and he's the commander in chief. I mean, you have federal installations out there that need protection in terms of the ICE facilities. I mean, they burned a courthouse down in Portland during the BLM riots. There's a long history of attacks on the feds there. Also, like with the new frameworks for domestic terrorism that the White House has rolled out, and the big one there is National Security Presidential Memorandum 7, which basically outlines the federal government's strategy to deal with and put down these domestic terror threats. All of the authorities and jurisdictional elements are laid out there. It's a federal problem in terms of domestic terrorism. The feds have the responsibility and the authority to deal with it. And so they're taking it right to the source, which is Portland, where it's just a hotbed of a lot of this extremism. And so legally, I think, his actions with the Guard have been upheld in other jurisdictions. That being said, the left's going to do everything they can to possibly stop this. They don't want their linkages to the domestic terrorism, units out there to be more known. And so they're going to fight this. They hate that the president has highlighted Antifa because they're the foot soldiers of the left.
Why is Portland, Oregon, as you put it, a hotbed for groups like Antifa?
Yeah, I don't know how it came to be. I mean, the Pacific Northwest has a lot of extremism and historically has. I think, a lot of Oregon is pretty great place and great country, but Portland has had a really out of control, drug scene. The hipster scene of old, which some may have found charming, has morphed into one of, Antifa and radicalism. I mean, this is where, Antifa basically tried declaring a separate legal jurisdictions for themselves in the Chaz. It's become a magnet for these types of people. There's a particular strand of, far leftism in the Pacific Northwest. And, with Portland being one of the bigger cities up there, it naturally serves as kind of the population center and hotbed for it. There's nothing new here, unfortunately. Portland's kind of been the Antifa capital for a while.
Mike, it's no secret that the president wants to go on to other cities too. Will the outcome of this case perhaps set a precedent for whether he is actually allowed to?
I don't think so. I mean, you have perilous legal jurisdiction there. It's, Ninth Circuit, I think, is the Court of Appeals, which President Trump is stacking, some good nominees in. But in terms of, the worst legal playing field, it's out there. And so you could get a district split in other places. I think the president has a great legal track record on these actions being upheld. And so this could end up at SCOTUS at some point. You're going to have the president, trying to do this a lot of other places because it's required really to meet the law enforcement responsibilities of the federal government to deal with domestic terrorism. And I don't think the Supreme Court would take such a really perverse legal view that the president can basically doesn't have the authority to deal with his most central authority and power, which is keeping this country safe.
So this could make it all the way to the Supreme Court, Mike. Mike, before I let you go, talk to us a little bit about the president's latest memorandum on countering domestic terrorism. You've said people haven't really picked up on how big this actually is.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it really escaped the attention of a lot of people who have been, really focusing in on what the president and his advisors are mapping out here in terms of dealing with Antifa and other associated groups. But essentially, they issued a national security policy memorandum, so a different form than an executive order, but it directs all the different component pieces of the federal government to really work in concert to attack this problem. You have taskings to places like the IRS or Treasury to look at the money flow. You have the marshals getting involved. You have the calling to set up joint terrorism task forces, which basically are the ways in which multi-agency efforts can collaborate to deal with this. So it's a whole of government very detailed approach. And I'm a huge fan of it, particularly because it names the threat with more specificity than we've seen coming out of the federal government. Unfortunately, there's a lot of political correctness in law enforcement and intelligence agencies and whatnot, and they've refused to, kind of say the threat for what it is and name it. And so the National Security Policy Memorandum speaks to that. It says, it calls out the anti-Christian, violence that's going on and goes into great detail. And so I think this will be the major target for the left in terms of litigation, because it really puts rocket boosters on the ability to actually back up and do what the president has called out.
Incredible. Mike Howell of the Oversight Project. Mike, thank you.
Thanks for having me on.
And the Trump administration is investing in coal power to help the U.S. in the AI race. This would upgrade coal plants and keep them open. NTD's David Lamb reports.
The Trump administration announced an investment to boost America's coal industry, putting in $625 million. U.S. Energy Secretary Christopher Wright made the announcement Monday, saying the expanded programs aim to keep coal plants open. This would lower energy costs and enable the U.S. to win the global race in artificial intelligence. $350 million will go towards modernizing coal power units with reliable electric power and capacity, $175 million for projects expected to bring cheaper, reliable energy to rural communities, $50 million to extend the lifespan of coal plants by upgrading wastewater systems, and $50 million into dual fuel and efficiency using 100% natural gas. The Bureau of Land Management is making up to 13.1 million acres of federal coal available for lease, lowering royalty rates to strengthen competitiveness, and streamlining approvals for projects in Montana, Wyoming, Tennessee, and beyond. In June, lawmakers introduced laws to confront the Chinese Communist Party's growing exploitation of AI, as AI touches upon multiple sectors of the economy, including government.
President Trump understands that. He understands that last year in China opened up 93 gigawatts of coal last year. 1 gigawatt runs Denver. So China opened up effectively the power from coal for 93 Denvers.
These actions follow the passing of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. Wright said that coal has been under assault for years, even though it's vital for America's industrial might. The programs also aim to add what he called pollution control so that coal plants run cleaner and better. David Lamb, NTD News.
Still to come, in baseball, the first round of the playoffs starts tomorrow, highlighted by the biggest rivalry in the game. Dave Martin joins us for a preview. And tens of thousands of participants showed up for the annual Tunnel to Towers 5K run and walk yesterday, including our own Tiffany Meyer and Stephania Cox. We'll take a look at the story behind the race when we come back. And now for your sports news, we're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Good evening, Dave.
Good evening, Paul.
Dave, a lot going on today. Let's start with the NFL. We see the New York Giants announced today that Pro Bowl wide receiver Malik Nabers will miss the rest of the season with a torn ACL. How are they going to replace him?
Well, to be honest, they'll probably struggle to, I mean, they've got Darius Slayton right now as their number 2 receiver. He's a very good number 2 receiver. But simply put, Nabers in just his second season was already becoming one of the best receivers in the league. So unless they're planning to make a huge trade, it's going to be tough to replace his production. Now, last year as a rookie, he caught 109 passes. That was a Giants franchise record. And really, his 127 catches through 19 games, that is the most in NFL history. The second most in NFL history. Only Odell Beckham had more, and he was a former Giant. That was 10 years ago. Now, the play that got Nabers injured seemed very ordinary. He kind of went up for the ball, maybe landed wrong there on the turf, immediately grabbed his right leg when he hit the ground. I mean, sometimes those non-contact injuries end up being the worst, and In any case, though, the plan is for him to have surgery and be ready for the start of next season. Now, elsewhere in the league, we had another major injury yesterday, it could be a major injury. Lamar Jackson, quarterback for Baltimore, missed really most of the second half of their game against the Kansas City Chiefs with some kind of hamstring injury. We've not heard yet from the Ravens the extent of the injury. So a couple of big names here in the NFL down, so people should know, especially for your fantasy football team, right there, Paul.
Well, I think you traded Nabers. You saw this coming,
yeah,
Dave.
Unfortunately, or fortunately for me, Kerry got stuck with Nabers. He also got stuck with Burrow, who actually got injured 2 weeks ago. So I've done very well there. Unfortunately, though, it still doesn't translate to any wins. I'm like 1-3 or something.
Oh, that's typical. You don't know much about this stuff. Dave, college football news. Latest rankings just came out. Ohio State retaining the number 1 after a number of top teams lost on Saturday. What do you make of it?
You know, Buckeyes, they were like the only one that retained their ranking of the top 10 teams. They stayed number 1 after last week. You know, Oregon moved up to number 2 after the win at Penn State. Very competitive game there in Happy Valley on Saturday. It was a double overtime win there. Miami State did not play over the weekend, but dropped from 2nd to 3rd so that Penn State can move up to number 2. Ole Miss moved up 9 spots to number 4 after beating LSU. Very impressive win there. We also had Alabama moving into the top 10 after winning at Georgia. That was probably the most impressive win of the weekend, I thought, snapping Georgia's 33-game winning streak. Alabama, meanwhile, badly needed this win after that start this year, losing to Florida State. And really, they did not have a typical Alabama season last year with 3 losses and making the playoffs. Now, overall, 10 SEC teams were in the top 25. Not surprising, given that they're such a football-crazy conference. Big Ten had 6 teams in the top 25, 4 of those in the top 10. Big 12 and ACC had 4 teams each. So still very early in the season, though, here.
College football, looking forward to it. Dave, some incredible golf news. We have Tom Watson, former Ryder Cup captain. He congratulated Team Europe today on their win. As you understand.
That was nice of him. Right.
He also criticized American fans for their behavior during the tournament. What did you make of that over the weekend?
Well, he was pretty much right. You know, Team Europe took a lot of heckling from the American fans. Rory McIlroy in particular, Lowry as well. I mean, McIlroy is the best player, or the second best player in the world, I should say. By all accounts, it really crossed the line of acceptable behavior. I mean, sometimes it took place while he was trying to hit a shot, sometimes just because he was walking near the fans, caused delays there. They even had to bring in extra security. There was even an instance where it at least looked like someone threw a beer that hit McIlroy's wife, you know, deflecting off her hat, whether it was intentional or not, though. Now, golf is generally a gentleman's game. It really was not over the weekend here. Now, this was at Bethpage Black course over in Farmingdale, New York, not too far from Manhattan. And there was actually a writer for Golf Digest that astutely pointed out not just to blame New York fans for this, because New York fans surely would have booed the Americans. I mean, the U.S. team was pummeled the first 2 days against the Europeans. I think they're now 11.5 to 4.5 going into Sunday. They had a great comeback Sunday, but it wasn't enough. Still lost 15-13. Overall, though, it was not really a good look for the U.S. in general, whether it was their golfing fan or their fans at Bethpage Black there.
So they said, don't blame the New York fans? So who was to blame?
Well, the fans in general. I mean, probably U.S. fans for sure, but you can't say most New York fans, you know, they're known for booing their own team. So you would think they would have booed the U.S. players. That was really not what they were doing, though. So you get it?
Incredible. There's lots to talk about. Dave, I've got like a minute. Shifting gears, baseball. Regular season ended yesterday. Now the playoffs start tomorrow. What do you think of the best wild card round-up matches?
Well, for sure, it's got to be Yankees versus Red Sox. Now, it's not probably going to have the intensity this had back in 2003 and 2004, where those two teams met back-to-back years in the ALCS. Those were absolute classics there. But it still should be good. It's still Yankees versus Red Sox. The Game 1 pitching matchup I'm especially looking forward to. Garrett Crochet of Boston against Max Fried from New York. Both were all-stars this year. Both will probably end up top 5 in the Cy Young voting. And remember, this is a wild card round. It's just best of 3 games. Every game is so critical. That's probably going to be the most intense series. I think Cleveland versus Detroit should be another good one. Cleveland, of course, caught Detroit here in the last month of the season, but Detroit still snuck in as the wild card team, so they could get some redemption here in this series. Meanwhile, the National League, you've got a couple of fun series. The Dodgers with Shohei Ohtani, the reigning World Series champions, they'll face the upstart Reds, and then you've got the Cubs and Padres as well. All 4 series start tomorrow, so it's going to be a very exciting week for us baseball fans.
Dave Martin, thank you. Appreciate it, sir.
Thank you, Paul.
And tens of thousands gathered in New York City yesterday for one of the nation's largest 5K runs, the Tunnel to Towers. It honors the first responders and service members who gave their lives on September 11th and in the years that followed. NTD's Stephanie Cox and Tiffany Meyer took part in the run.
3, 2, 1.
Tens of thousands took to the streets of New York City Sunday for the Tunnel to Towers 5K, one of the nation's largest 5K runs.
They've come from all across the country to remember friends, family, and neighbors, and to honor the nation they call home.
Paying respect to first responders, servicemen and women, and the heroes of 9/11.
The race follows the steps of firefighter Stephen Siller. On 9/11, he drove his truck to the tunnel on his way to the Twin Towers, only to find it closed for security purposes. Fueled by his sense of duty, he strapped on 60 pounds of gear and ran on foot through the tunnel to the Twin Towers, where he gave his own life to save others. He left behind a wife, 5 kids, and 5 other siblings, including his brother, Frank Siller.
Would he have gone through and gone up West Street and into the South Tower if he knew he was going to die? Yes, he would have.
Frank Siller honored Stephen's legacy by starting the Tunnel to Towers Foundation to help first responders, veterans, and Gold Star families. The foundation now raises millions of dollars each year to fund many programs they have, including building mortgage-free homes for injured veterans and first responders.
There's so much under the hood with Tunnel to Towers, with helping veterans, mortgages, homeless veterans. So, to give money to a place it's going directly to the right spot is huge for us.
It makes an amazing difference. I think every first responder, anybody in the military who goes to do their job, never in the back of their mind, if something ever happened to them, knows that a foundation like this is here to take care of their family.
Through the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel, 30,000 folks from all across the country and from different branches of service showed up to run, walk, and roll, carrying the memory of loved ones and the legacy of every hero who gave it all.
Means a lot. Representing my brothers and sisters in arms, representing my brothers and sisters on the job in the fire department.
How can you argue with supporting our first responders and veterans? So they are just wonderful organizations.
2 sons that were first responder firefighters, so.
Yeah, and one is still in the reserves, almost 20 years.
Coast Guard.
Coast Guard. So yeah, this means something to us.
They're all good people. They're good peoples.
Yeah.
People coming together, the camaraderie, it's the only time of the year where I feel like everybody can really feel close.
As runners emerge from the tunnel, banners featuring the names, images, and even companies of fallen firefighters, police officers, and service members line the route, carried by members of the military, cadets, and volunteers from the community, offering a touching tribute to those who died that day on September 11th.
Crossing the finish line with so many here is a reminder to all of us
that through darkness, there's always light and the promise to never forget. In New York City, I'm Stephanie Cox.
And I'm Tiffany Meyer, and thanks for running with NTD.
Steph and Tiffany, good job. And the Tunnel to Towers 5K has raised millions for veterans and first responder families nationwide. And to learn more or to take part in your own community, visit t2t.org. And that's all for today's news. For round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Paul Graney. Good night.